Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sun Raven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and this show comes to you every Monday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on WVOX. It's 1460 on your AM dial and WVOX.com worldwide. We talk about health and healthcare, your health in particular, and I have the fortune of knowing some amazing people who I can bring on the show to speak with us about the emergence of perhaps a new paradigm in health, as I call it. And my guest today, Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary, also talks about a new model for healthcare in her book, The Prime. And we'll get into that, but I want to give you a little bit more of her background because she's truly a remarkable individual who, if you read her book, talks about her transformation as a physician, somebody growing up actually in a much more traditional, ancient, and I would say wise culture in the practice of medicine in India, and then coming to the United States, a product here then of this culture and this healthcare system, and then reconnecting to her roots and then connecting more dots to become something truly remarkable. She's a neuroscientist, obviously a medical doctor, who has expertise in both modern neurology and the ancient science of health known as Ayurveda, which I would like to talk to her about with you. She was the former director of Wellspring Health in Scripps Memorial Hospital in Southern California and is now the chief medical officer for New Practices, again, looking to create a new model for healthcare. And several months ago published her first book, The Prime, Prepare and Repair Your Body for Spontaneous Weight Loss, which is an interesting story, which I'd like to get to because she talks about weight loss as a side effect. So, Dr. Chaudhary, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's such my pleasure to be speaking to you again, and congratulations, by the way, on your show.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, I must say, because, and it's exciting for me because more people need to hear about the emergence of a new system, perhaps not a new system, but an old system returning for us to re-envision our own personal health and our collective health. The world needs it, people need it. And through your own experience, similar to mine, we realize that the Western medical model is quite limited. And we'd love very much to preserve what's great about it, acute care, life-threatening services, remarkable technologies, but then there's got to be a return to more wisdom and empowering people to learn to take better care of themselves.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that, so many of us who have been trained in this field and really were enamored with everything that you mentioned, kind of some of the emerging technologies in modern medicine, that we're not giving it up. We really are looking at this kind of revolutionary new way of bringing some of the older, wiser ways of looking at prevention and combining them with some of the, amazing technological advances that we've made. So really we're doing something new that has never been done before, and that's what I find particularly exciting about this time.
I agree, and it takes somebody, I would say, like yourself, who's had maybe an experience, and you call yourself a bridge, because you've had the experience in both worlds, and you can see the benefits of both, but it's not everyone who then can tie those together so nicely and has the credibility that in the West, at least, people look for toward people who've put the time into the study of science. But then you've emerged with something far more, interesting, I think, at this point, and maybe valuable to people.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So tell us maybe to start, because I use, in your just, describing your background a little bit, Ayurveda, and I would say it's a term that maybe more people are aware of now, but not everybody. So maybe let's start there with what that is, and then how your story weaves that tradition, that system of healthcare into this new emerging model.
Yeah, sure. So Ayurveda, it's actually very, very simple, even though it sounds complicated simply because it's a new word. But really, the basis of Ayurvedic medicine is that food itself is medicine, and the way that we live impacts whether we are filled with disease as we age or if we remain healthy. And so this is really kind of the original version of lifestyle medicine on the planet. And it looked heavily at foods and herbs as the first line of defense and the first line really of prevention of disease. And, it's interesting because growing up, we had this interwoven into our life, but I wouldn't have overtly said we were practicing Ayurvedic medicine because it really is practiced in your kitchen. So we were practicing it in terms of the way we were eating, the spices that we were cooking with. And if we did get like an upper respiratory tract infection, my parents went first for the ginger or the garlic or the turmeric or the honey before they would, take us to the doctors for antibiotics. So we weren't exposed to a lot of antibiotics growing up, and our meals were, fairly balanced, whole food, mostly plant-based. And then, of course, just like, most people, especially in the teenage years, I started to move away from that traditional Indian diet and more into the refined sugars, simple carbohydrates, processed foods of the American diet. And it was really the first time in my life that I ever started to get any type of like stomach upset or regular infection. Up until that point, we were really pretty much disease-free. And still it wasn't that big of a deal, so it wasn't anything that I was highly alerted to. But I'm sure you relate to this. Mm-hmm. You go to medical school, and what little good habits you have during that time kind of go to pot.
Is the disease.
Yes. It is the worst thing you could do to your health is to actually go through medical training. And then residency made it only worse. And then I came out of that whole process with just horrific health habits. And because everybody else had the same habits, they really didn't seem like they were bad habits because every physician I knew was overworked, skipping lunch, eating processed food. And so we become kind of this culture of total imbalance and disease. And it wasn't until I started getting migraine headaches, which, for me as a neurologist, it wasn't a big deal because I treated these on a regular basis. But my headaches became so debilitating, and it was the first time I had ever started a prescription medication, and I couldn't tell what was worse, the side effects of the medication or the migraines. And so that really kind of was my turning point, both personally and professionally, because that is what led me to come back to Ayurvedic medicine. And as I mentioned in the book, it was actually my mom, because I didn't know where to go. And she was the only person that I knew that was linked to that. And she had reintroduced me to an Ayurvedic practitioner, and the results were just phenomenal. Within, 3 months, my headaches were gone. But the truly shocking part of that process for me was when I went to go see the Ayurvedic practitioner, and he did the evaluation, and he said, "Oh, everything is starting in your gut. This is a gut issue." And I was dumbfounded because as a neurologist and, in medical training, when do you ever hear that migraine headaches have anything to do with improper digestion? And now as we're starting to understand the microbiome and, the intricacy it plays in our overall health, now this is starting to make more and more sense. But, this is over a decade ago. When he told me this, I was just utterly shocked. But that's where my quest to bridge this understanding between the gut-brain connection actually began.
It's remarkable how many of our colleagues who go into integrative medicine come from a place of personal experience. And you wrote in the book something very interesting, which is I wound up prescribing medicines that I wouldn't take for myself. And that's the dilemma, isn't it? That we as physicians understand the double-edged swords that we're using when we treat people with medicines and some of the other technologies, intervention. And wouldn't it be nice if there was an alternative to that. Not in a life-threatening situation, perhaps, but when things are chronic, when people have time, when they're not literally falling apart, but when they are really looking for answers about how they can get themselves back in shape, this is really the place to look. This is the answer. This integrative medicine, the integration of the best of different systems to bring to bear for an individual who's got something going on that is symptomatic.
Well, and the most important part of it for me was, my migraine headaches, even though they were so disabling at a certain point before I started to do this, because I basically did everything else until I went into Ayurvedic medicine. But the reality is that, let's say I did find the right medication and they got rid of my headaches, it doesn't get rid of the habits that are causing inflammation in your body. And so it's, even if you become asymptomatic because you're taking medication, you're slowly getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And so there's this complete disconnect between what's happening to the body and what your awareness is, because you're saying, oh, well, that symptom is gone. But the reality is we're medicating our patients into sicker and sicker states because we're not helping them to reverse the habits that are causing it. I mean, when I look back at how I was living then, I was working, 15 hours a day. My diet was a total mess. After my medical training, that's just what I had learned, to eat on the go, to eat whatever was quick. I wasn't exercising. I was getting irregular with my meditation practice because I was working so long. And these are all habits that are necessary to help people grow healthy as they age.
Yeah, so and yet it's remarkable. So when people don't feel well, they go to doctors and they get more and more of these things added. They're almost layers. And a lot of the advice out there that is in the lay press, while well-meaning, I think also gets people confused and maybe overlooking the core issue, which, as you said, these days, people who are studying it understand that it seems to be the intestinal tract as being a major, major issue. So food, of course, would make sense as what can be adjusted to have the biggest impact, at least start bringing people to the right direction. Now, your book, which I've read and I find particularly detailed in a very positive way, meaning very explicit directions about what to do, when to do it, with several options in terms of how intense people want to take it on, with anything from you do it quickly to do it a little bit more comfortably. I really liked how much detail there was, but since the show, we've got 15 minutes and it's not possible, and of course we really want people to just spend the time with the book and then understand its principles. So we don't want to give people fast answers. Of course, that's the antithesis of slow medicine anyway. But the idea is to get people interested in this, in a different way. And I guess what you notice is perhaps where so many people are, which is they feel themselves too heavy. And that's the symptom that they want to address. And there's so much out there in terms of dietary advice about weight loss. But what we know is that it really doesn't work. In fact, I don't have to convince people of it. I've asked 100 people who've been dieting recently, about 99 of them will tell me, it worked for a little while, but I'm back where I started or worse. So what you've said about that, though, is that people are doing it backwards. And I want you to explain that a little bit.
Sure. And, this book was really the result of 10 years of trial and error, because when I kind of found this new way of healing the brain, I immediately wanted to bring it to my patients. And when I tried to get them to change their diet, it was so hard. And so I hit kind of, the same conundrum. And this is where the advantage really of having done, over 20 clinical studies in neurology became really advantageous, because I put on that researcher's cap and said, why is it so hard for people to change their habits around food? Because these are not unmotivated people. Most of these people were, they had postgraduate degrees. They started their own businesses. They were running families with multiple children. And, they had the motivation to be able to do like the after-school schedules of 4 different kids, yet they could not find the motivation in their minds to change what they were eating. And I said, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. There seems to be something missing. And so what I started to realize over the course of, several years of studying the problem and doing research is that there's actually a biochemical obstacle. And, we're starting to study this more and more now. I wish I had some of this information back then. But your gut flora, so the bacteria and the healthy yeast that live in your GI tract, help you to make good decisions. Parasitic bacteria, so the unhealthy bacteria and the unhealthy yeast, they help you to make bad decisions about your food. And this is completely subconscious, meaning it's not something you're thinking about. They're sending neurotransmitters to your brain that are directing you to eat one way or another. And so once I started to realize that there's an actual biochemistry to changing the way that you eat, and that the brain actually adapts neurochemically just the way as it does to cocaine, it adapts to certain foods like sugar, that you can't just come up to somebody and say, hey, go ahead and change this without first taking care of these biochemical steps. And that's why I named the book The Prime. This is the priming step. It's the initial step before you try to make the dietary changes, because once you take care of these biochemical obstacles and you go from what I call in the book a dumb gut to a smart gut, then the changes in diet become automatic. It'll become much easier. And then when your practitioner is saying, hey, listen, you really should be doing this, your gut and your brain are responding together saying, yes, you're right, I should be doing this. So this is just that missing step before you implement the dietary suggestions. And I mean, I learned this, I don't want to say by accident, but it was a lot of trial and error. And then I finally kind of, figured out this formula. And that's why it's so detailed, is it took about a decade to kind of figure out, the secret sauce, so to speak. And what happened is my job became way easier. Once I put people through this program first and then asked them to start changing their diet, my success rate went from like about 25% to 85-90%.
Which is remarkable. And I think that it's such an important thing, which, just like in anything else, is before you make a major change, you make sure that you have everything lined up. And this is a piece that's often overlooked. I mean, maybe because, honestly, maybe people weren't even aware of it before. But now we sort of are becoming aware of how essential it is to prime our physiology before we make major changes. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be back with this conversation with Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary. And if you do want to call us, maybe ask a question, the number is 914-636-0110. Otherwise, we're going to talk more about just the way of living so that you, maybe with a little less efforting, can find greater results. So we'll be back.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered, experiential, and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Well, welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. I'm speaking with Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary, whose recently published book, The Prime, is what we're discussing, and just her overwhelming intelligence as far as an approach to health and healing that I think it's time. One of the things that you say, Dr. Chaudhary, which I really like, is it's not what you eat, but what you digest. And I think that there's something so wise about that. People, again, are focused on what's on their plate. And then they sit down and they're terribly anxious and they're even neurotic about this great food, not causing cancer, preventing heart disease. And that anxiety is contributing, obviously, to other neurochemical problems. But yet they're not appreciating that, even if it's great food and even if they are relaxed, if the microbiome, if the other things that are so involved in this very intricate mechanism, which is digestion and assimilation of those nutrients, is not intact, then it's not really getting us as far as we'd like. And that gets to your whole scientific approach to this, the physiology.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I used to see patients who would come in with this laundry list of supplements, and they were trying so hard. And after I get done with the evaluation, I say, you're not even absorbing 10% of this. And this is why it's so difficult to give people general dietary recommendations. When people say, well, what do you think about grains, or what do you think about meat? My first question is always, well, who's eating it? What does their microbiome look like? How strong is their digestion? Because, there's very few foods that you can just say they're bad across the board. So much of it has to do with who's eating it. And I think that's why we get a lot of our, mixed results, even in studies when we're studying populations of should we be eating this or should we be eating that? Who are you actually studying, and how strong is their digestion? Because that is going to be a major determining factor on whether or not you can make that suggestion to them.
Yeah, and that's why I think the community around us, the people we eat with, those who support us, are such a valuable part of the working relationships that we have in life that are so essential to our health going beyond.
Yeah, so true.
So these are the dots that get connected, but only if you really spend the time to sort of sort it out that way and organize it, which again is why I feel that those such as you, who are the pioneers in the field of integrative medicine, are expressing themselves either through their writing or through their presentations, are making, in ways. One of the things in your book too that I thought was, I say funny, but really almost a sad commentary on life, is when you talked about the medical intervention that you had.
Yes. It was kind of horrifying at the time, but yeah, it's funny now.
Yeah, but your colleagues who are saying, taking you aside and trying to pull you off the ledge, saying, do you know what you're doing? You're going into this field of broader, more, sort of wise appreciation of health, but you're abandoning your Western medical roots, and that's distressing to them. Look what you're giving up. Isn't that something?
Yeah, and what's amazing though is they were really well intentioned. I mean, what they saw was this young neurologist who seemed like she had the world, ahead of her, and that I was just throwing it all away. And one of their genuine concerns was that, okay, let's say if all of this works, let's say you actually are able to reverse disease, that is the worst business model for practicing medicine.
Right.
And that was the part that kind of hit me the hardest. And it kind of hit me in my head and my heart at the same time, because it was like, wait a minute, when did we lose the desire to heal our patients? Like, when did this become a business model?
Right. When we spoke a couple of months ago, I guess, and it was about the future of medicine, and I was talking to you about corporations leading the way. And, one of the things that disappoints me, though, is I have to say, is a lot of the medical institutional resistance to this. I'm just wondering what you feel, is going to be the way we're going to help people. Is it going to be directly to people, or are we going to work with the medical institutions? Obviously, probably both to some extent, but I'm finding still a lot of frustration when I speak to medical executives in embracing this. And just want your thoughts of where have you been successful? I guess maybe that would be, I want to spin it positively, but where have you been successful?
Well, this is a really great question, because this is at the heart of what I do in new practices. And I've been in both positions. I've been in positions where I say, oh my gosh, this is going to be the most frustrating road forward. And then I'll see other things happen where I go, no, we really are, getting into this whole new world where we're starting to understand this. And, we've come to community hospitals, and we've shown them some of the results that we've had with reversing Alzheimer's disease, reversing diabetes, and they'll just, the response we get is, well, but we make money if people are sick. And what we have kind of found is that it's going to be a mixture, that marketing directly to patients and giving the power back to them is going to be a very important part. But there are also kind of what I call enlightened medical centers that they're also starting to see the economic shifts that have to take place, or we're simply all going to be bankrupt. We cannot support this economically. And so they're also jumping on board. And what we're hoping is, as we get more and more data, when we have like 1,000 people who go through our diabetes program, or 1,000 people who go through our Alzheimer's program, and then we bring this data back to health insurance companies and say, look, we are going to actually save you money, that I think there is this way forward. I think we're just kind of still in that murky part where we're holding on to the past. We don't quite have a path forward yet. But, many of us are kind of trudging along and just trying to kind of push through the resistance so that everybody sees like, oh, hold on, this actually saves us money. and it's better for us. And there is a way to make being healthy a financially successful model. I mean, in a way, it's a much harder to do it long term for being, financially successful by keeping people unhealthy. Right. That, come on, there has to be a successful model financially for people to be healthy. And so that's kind of where I think, we have this kind of 5 to 10 year tug of war period where we're going to have to prove our point. But I think we really are changing, and I get the opportunity of interacting with both the private market as well as, health centers, and I get to be a part of that change. It's not 100%, but it's definitely more than 50.
Where can people reach you?
The best way right now, we're just setting up our new website, but the best way is just to go to the Prime Club. That's the easiest way to find out about some of the programs that we're doing, and that's just theprimeclub.com.
Well, Dr. Chaudhary, thank you so much. I could talk to you for another hour. Maybe I will. I'll get you back. So good luck with everything. And,
thank you so much.
And I'll look forward to maybe seeing you in California. I'm going to be out in Southern California, actually, in about a month. So maybe we'll...
Oh, please let me know. I would love to catch up.
Okay, take care. You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. We're here every Monday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. In the month of August, we've got Lisa Rankin, Torono Lodog, Daphne Miller, all up ahead. So come back and talk to us. In the interim, take care of yourself. Take care of your gut. Take care of your life.